And great, you're welcome to join with video if you want. That's lovely. You can join with audio, mute yourselves and unmute yourselves as appropriate. And thank you so much for being here today. So I'll be monitoring the chat in case questions come in through there. And we are here specifically to get into the topic of Get Organized, but we'll also cover any questions that you guys had from Get Clean as well. So again, this is really intended to be a question and answer webinar. So you guys are going to get what you need out of it by asking any questions that you have. I did double check and we haven't had any additional questions come in via the form that I have for you guys to fill out. So that means that it's up to you guys on the line to really take me through what questions you have, what challenges. I'm happy to give you a little bit of a preview of what's coming next. We can even get back into the topics from Get Clean if that would be helpful. But whatever you guys need to make sure that you're able to implement some of these pieces, that's what we're here for. So let's get started. Go ahead, and we have right now Heidi, Lori, and Audrey. And as others join us, you're certainly welcome to chime in as well. But I can go back through some of the concepts if you want, or just dig in however you want. Please feel free. As we get into this, I think the main thing to kind of keep in mind is the difference between where we're going to process the stuff versus where we're going to store it. Process versus storing is one of the key concepts that happens in Get Organized. Tell me, let's get everybody unmuted a little bit. Let's have some conversation around this, because I promise you that will be helpful to the people who are not on the call. Welcome, Teresa. Glad to have you here. Thank you for going on video. I appreciate it. Please go on video. It's okay. There's only a few of us in the room right now, and I'm still sharing my screen, so it would be lovely to see you. And Tanya, welcome to the party. We're just getting started. I do have it being recorded, and the idea here is for us to really dig into the topics. We are welcome to jump back to any of the Get Clean topics from last week, and we can get into the Get Organized topics. So let's hear, what kind of questions do you guys have? You can unmute yourself, and you can go ahead, or you certainly can type any questions in the chat as well.
I'm still really struggling with just breaking my bad habits of using the inbox as my to-do list. It's been 20 years of using it as
welcome, Tammy.
As
we are just getting started with any questions people have. Okay, this is your first time through, so you're not quite sure. No problem, Heidi. Would it be helpful for me to take you through like the visual of how my Outlook is kind of set up so you guys can see how I do this?
Yes.
Like live in real life?
Yes,
okay,
please.
Good. And was that, Teresa, were you going to say something? It looks like you're ready to say something.
I was just saying that it's a lot of bad habits to try and break. I know that this system works, and it's just hard.
I'll go ahead and pull up. We'll change my screen sharing, and I'll go ahead and pull up my Outlook. And then I'll make sure that that's shared properly. And again, folks, welcome to those who are just joining us. This is being recorded, and we are just going through some of the concepts as we have related to Get Organized. Okay. And I do want to just double check. You guys can view, you can see my screen.
All good, Jen.
So to get started with this, though, I am going to take us back to the Get Clean and take you through the whole process of those pieces, so you can see how this starts to flow together. So in Get Clean, the first key was in our inbox to have a visual indicator of our to-do items. A visual indicator of our to-do items. So examples of visual indicators include using the flag. Now, we'll be covering this part more in the Get Started portion, but just keep in mind that many people probably have flagged items, and what starts to happen is our flagged items start to pile up, because flagged items we use to say, hey, I want to find it again later, this is important, but in Outlook speak, a flagged item means it is a task that needs to be completed, and when you're done, you can either mark it as complete or clear the flag by right-clicking on it. For the sake of what we're chatting about today, my goal is that you just have used the flag or you've left something marked as unread as your clear visual indicators of things that you still need to do. When you have that, the goal is to take those things that you need to do. You're going to make a new folder. I call it Respond. And I just use these @ signs. This is an old school way of doing it, not necessarily to use the @ signs any longer. That just floated those topics to the top. And you would select all of them. Now, for select all, something to note in case that is helpful for you is that if you want to select all of your messages that are flagged, you could actually go up here and sort by your flag status. You could sort by your flag start date, and all of those would then either float to the top or the bottom, and then you could select all of them at once. To do that, you can use the Shift key, click on that first item, hold your Shift key down, and then click on the last item, and that selects everything in between. So Shift is gathering stuff from each end. Or use your Control key, and I'm going to click this first one and then go down and click this bottom one. Control gives you more control over what you're selecting, so you're only selecting those particular messages. And then left click on one that you have selected, and then just drag and drop it to the folder where you want that to land. Okay, so again, we're just going through a couple of the get clean concepts right now. So, and I didn't drop them because I'm just keeping these in my inbox for the sake of demo. So by the way, this is my work inbox. This is what it looks like after I've woken up. I've done one cleanup of the morning, and this is what's piled up. I do have one in here from yesterday because I have not gotten to file that yet, but otherwise it's not too backed up. And that's what my goal is for you guys, is that your inbox is not going to get backed up. So then the last step is anything that needs to be filed, you can just put in your keep folder. Now, I specifically, for some reason, decided to name my keep folder retain in this mailbox, and literally I would drag it over here and drop it to retain. I have floated my most important folders to the top in my Outlook here under favorites. So to float a folder to favorites, you're going to right click on that folder. I'm going to remove it from favorites to start. Right click on the folder and hit add to favorites. That floats that stuff up top, so you're not spending time scrolling, wondering where it should go. So I'm going to come back to you guys. I'm going to stop my screen sharing for a second and come back to you guys live. And again, the goal here is that you guys get the chance to ask the questions. So I'm looking in chat to see if there's any questions that have come in. We have a few people who have joined. And again, we had some questions. Thank you for the new people, Michael, Matt, Nina, Jessica. Welcome to the meeting. Please feel free, if you have questions, pipe right in, interrupt me, because the goal here is that we are answering your questions and using your questions as my teaching. Okay, we are recording, so this will be available later. And where we got started was just a quick recap of where we got started with getting clean, so that we'd then be able to flow into the get organized portion. Yep, Michael, good question. So I just mentioned that to folks, and no worries. It's an old school trick. So old school was with your folders, if you didn't use some sort of indicator up top, some people would number them, some people would, oh, my screen's not being shared. Hold on. I'll come back just a second. I'll share my screen again. No, I'm glad you asked. Not a problem. So it's an old school trick that in the old days, when Microsoft would automatically alphabetize your folder names and didn't give you any flexibility of the order in which they worked, different people would use different tricks to get their folders to float to the top. And so they would do something in the file name, and they would do, like, I would sometimes do a dash, or I would letter them like a period and then name it what I wanted it to be, or I'd use a number system or something like that. Or some people would use an asterisk. There was a training class I took at one point and they used @ signs, and I liked it. It worked for me. But that truly is old school, outdated, and unnecessary. So you can right click on any folder at any point now, and you can just do move up or move down, and have those go exactly where you want them rather than in alphabetical order. However, do note, I think if you notice, when I did the move down here, that did not correspondingly move them down here in my favorites, but we do have the option to move them up and down in here as well. So it's really just like, how does your brain work best? And again, our goal in that first step of Get Clean was that you had that clear visual indicator of your to-dos, that you were able to move your to-dos to your Respond folder, and then anything that you needed to keep would be moved to your Keep folder. So those were just a couple tips and tricks related to that particular area. Let me come back and see if there's any other questions. All right, so we have a good number of people on the call, you guys. We're ready to dig in. That was just a quick recap of what we covered in Get Clean. What questions do you have about the Get Organized content? Again, the concepts that we were covering under Get Organized was that there's a very different place for where you process your work, again, like the piles of paper, versus where you store your stuff. So I'll show you in mine. So my @ signs are where I process. My @ signs are where I process. So for me, Respond is stuff that needs to be handled. It may not need to be handled that day. And actually, I believe, Michael, you were kind of saying the way that you have it is you have like a to-do and a follow-up. And those are different levels of ways to defer your steps. To-do means that it's pretty urgent. This is stuff that I'm working on and needs to happen, and let's get this done. Versus follow-up is, I don't want to lose track of it, but it's not urgent. Michael, if you want to chime in, please do. Is that a fair way to describe your distinction on those?
Can you hear me? Yay. I think so, right? No.
I am so sorry. I am just hearing, apparently my speakers were not plugged in properly. We're good now. I can hear you. Please talk.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just going to type it up. Say no, not really. I would say more that what I've done is my to-do was more like stuff that was just super low priority. I was operating out of the Respond as my really to-do list. So I've actually changed the name of it to waiting, because it was mostly waiting stuff just based on what you talked about this day, or the last training for this. But that my to-do was more like you're waiting.
Got it.
So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
So yeah, so the way that I have this organized right now is it's different ways for me to batch my work. Okay. So Respond means I need to get it done. Just double checking on, there's some background noise coming in that I wanted to try and manage quickly here. Okay, I think I got it. So back to the screen. These folders are where I'm doing my work, where we're processing the stuff, not where I store it. So the Respond is where I go to get my responses done. It's my to-do, it's my immediate actions kind of thing. Scheduling one-on-ones, I batch those. For me, those are networking meetings for the most part, which means rather than scheduling them one at a time and having that take up all different random places in my calendar, I basically schedule one-on-ones once a week. I look at all the one-on-ones that have been requested, and I say, these are the times I'm scheduling them for the next week. What times work best for you? So that is, I keep this as a specific separate processing folder because I batched that work and I want it to be really easy for me to find and go do it. Now, this isn't something that I include in the training because I don't think that that's standard for everybody. This is where you guys have the flexibility in the system to say, oh, I get a lot of this, I'd like to batch it. Let's have a separate folder for it. And this would be something when we get to the Get Streamlined portion where we could create an autoresponder or a quick step that says when I get a request for a one-on-one that comes in. So when I get a request like this, I actually could make something up here called a quick step that basically is an autoresponder that says, thank you for your request for a one-on-one. I schedule these once a week. I'll be getting back to you Friday with some options for when we could meet. So you want those things to get a response, right? You want them to actually, you want to acknowledge that you've gotten this request, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to address the full thing and get it scheduled right away. Now, some people might say that that's an unnecessary step and can't you just do it right away? And other people have other calendaring features. This isn't necessarily to say that you should have a schedule one-on-one folder. Instead, it's a way to look at your process and say, how can I batch and streamline some of the work that I do when it's this, these one-on-ones are not essential to me completing my daily work. All right. My tickler folder is stuff that I don't want to forget about. I don't want to just file. But it's not stuff that I'm going to get to right away. In some cases, that's like my read and review folder. I actually have my read and review folder up under my personal email account versus my work email account. And that's where things automatically get to. Tickler is just like, yep, I don't want to forget about this, but it's not something that needs immediate action. And then we've already talked about that waiting folder, and things from my sent items typically land there. So I'm going to come back and just see if you guys have any other questions so far. And we can certainly unmute people for questions, and you're welcome to put them in chat. We have a few new people. We have a few new people who have joined us back. All right, let's take it back to then screen sharing. And we're going to talk about the getting organized a little bit further. So again, this part was that first part of the getting organized. Now remember, the steps in the get organized were to delete, which we know what to do with, defer, which we can put into the respond because we're not going to do it right away, delegate. So with delegate, that may be that we are, delegate might be, oh, hey, I need to send this back to this one person to get their feedback before we move any further. So once I've sent it, you'll notice my messages are grouped as conversations. So this is something that I think we talked about last time just a little bit, and we'll make sure you understand the feature. Actually, this is a great question, and I'd love all of you to respond in chat. I'd like to know how many of you are using the Show as Conversations feature. So yes, if you're using Show as Conversations, and no if you're not, and question mark if you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so yes if you're using Show as Conversations, no if you're not, and question mark if you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, we got a couple question marks, we got a couple no's, we got a couple yeses. Awesome. I love that you guys are you're all over the board on that. So I'll share with you some thoughts on this thing. First of all, in the old days of Microsoft, every message lived and existed, even if it was an existing chain of messages. So this is a message that I sent a few days ago, and this is one now that she responded. Each one of these messages live as a separate entity and really a separate file. And so we had some agility of where we'd put that stuff, but we were often filing stuff separately. When Google and Gmail came along, they strung everything together in what they call a conversation. So there's good and bad to that, because first of all, it was something that Outlook users were not used to. But the difference is, if I uncheck Show as Conversation right now, these items that are grouped together like this is from my sent items. I'm gonna undo this folder. It does show me now that I went from 9 messages down to 3. But the issue is that when I group them as conversations again, just this one folder at a time, the idea of showing stuff as conversations is it brings all the stuff together. It brings all the stuff together. And I think there was like 9 messages in here when we looked at all of them kind of looped together, even though there were just 3 main topics. And so what this does is this is the message that was in my inbox. This grabbed the one from my sent items that I hadn't moved because it didn't need to go in waiting. It was just waiting to get filed, actually. So it grabs it all together so you can see the whole thread, just in case it wasn't all contained in that one message. Now, what I like about this feature in Outlook is that you actually can turn it off and on. So it's under the View tab. You have the check mark where it says Show as Conversations, and you can change it to show that one conversation, that folder, or all your mailbox. Now, keep in mind, I don't suggest right now that you do it for your whole mailbox. If you have not tried it before, instead just try it for that one folder, and you'll see it kind of sucks all that stuff in together, and it makes it really easy for you to find stuff. As time goes on, if more people were viewing stuff as conversations, we may not have the need to go into your sent items and grab stuff to put in the waiting folder, because I would just grab this whole thing if I were waiting for it and put it in the waiting folder from there. So again, for some people, they're like, nope, I'm used to Outlook. I'm used to using things and everything being separate, and I don't mind finding it. And for other people, they really want it all pulled together that way. So let's go back, and I just want to get your feedback now on what do you think about this conversation. Michelle, you tried it and you just don't like it, which is completely fine. I actually think that sometimes using View as Conversations is a way to search. It's a way to search, because if I have that one conversation, I'm like, ooh, but I thought there were other messages related to this, you can always turn it right back off. And when you turn it back off, everything goes back to where it was. It's not like you haven't moved all that stuff together. You've just collected it. So this is a way to like search, pull it all together, and then if you need to turn it back off again, they all go back to where they were. Does it? Ooh, so come on, talk to me, people. Tell me stuff. What do you think? Give me some feedback. All right, Heidi's going to try it. Thank you. And again, keep in mind, you don't have to try it and commit to it. It's just that you know that it's there. So this leads us to, again, we're still talking about this Get Organized feature. Let me take you back to inbox here. We're still in the Get Organized. So again, we're talking about delete, delegate, defer, do, and direct. So one of the things to keep in mind, like, let me give you an example. I get stuff from Jane at Association Management all the time because it's through my through an organization I'm part of. When we talk about direct and we're trying to get our inbox cleaned, we'll get into this more in the Get Streamlined portion. This is about setting rules. But to get started right away, right-click on that thing, go to Rules, and now you can create your rule kind of more organically because it's looking at some of the features of the message where you're starting rather than starting from 0. So I can say always move messages from Jane at Associate Management Services. Well, that's cool, but I'm going to actually go in and do the create rule just a little bit differently. So what I have here is always move messages from Jane when it's sent to me only. Okay. Now, that means if it's coming from Jane and she's sending it directly to me, then I want that in my respond folder because I'm going to have to take action because I'm on some committees with them. Now, keep in mind, if Jane, in this instance, happened to be my boss, I could actually add additional alerts or notifications about that message. So again, we're going to dig into rules even more when we get to the Get Streamlined. But I know you guys are anxious to implement some of these tools. So since I'm in it right now, and this is part of our Getting Organized direct portion, I'm just taking a second to cover this for the first time. A lot of people, when we talk about rules, they're like, oh, I can't have a rule because of this exception. Well, guess what? You actually can have a rule and you can make exceptions within the rule. One thing I do is I turn off all of my visual and audio notifications in my email. I can always see over here if there's something new that's come in, you can see your unread messages, but I don't want anything flying across my screen or popping up or dinging. So if I said, oh my gosh, I want 99% of that stuff to never notify me, but if I'm getting stuff from this one person, I am okay with getting notified. You make up a rule and then you say, how do you want the visual or audio notification of that? So you can always set up a rule that includes an exception. In this particular instance, where we have Jane sending me only a message, if I go into the advanced options, this takes me into all sorts of things that I can specify about these messages so that I can tweak the rule if needed. So as an example, oh, do I want it sent only to me? Or do I want it where my name is not in the to-do box? So maybe I want it everything that's not coming to me. So here, this would be an example of making a rule for me when stuff is for me. You could make the counter rule instead of when stuff is not for you. In any one of these rule areas, if I were to click on this where it says with specific words in the body, this is where you customize and actually put the specific words in the list. And you can add multiple. So I could add survey. And I could add thank you. And you can add multiple words in here. Again, this is how you can tweak it. In another class I taught recently, somebody said that they've created a rule that if it says if it's from outside their company and it says unsubscribe somewhere in the body, it's automatically routing into a folder that they've made. It's not routing direct to their spam folder, but it's routing into a folder that they've kind of created to mimic a spam folder. So basically any subscriptions, whether they chose to subscribe to it or not, if it was coming from outside their company, it was going into this folder. And they were advised not to unsubscribe to things because in some cases that actually validates an email address. It gets really funky in some of those phishing rules. So this was the suggestion, is to have a rule, and that again was a way to clean out their inbox. So you can have all of these rules in here. These are the conditions. And then what do you want to do with it? Oh, well, when it comes, I want it to go to a certain folder. And the folder that I want it to go to is I actually have that going into a different mailbox just for how I have my stuff organized. So it's going to go into this other folder. And I select it and hit OK. And you can also have categories or forward it or all sorts of things that you can do. But the last step in here is your exceptions. So now you can say, except if the subject contains a specific word, or except if, and all of those exceptions can come in there. And when you're done, you hit finish. This rule will only run when you check email in Outlook. So some of these rules can be device specific. And sometimes it will clean out your inbox right away, and sometimes it will wait for you to refresh and run that rule. So rules can be helpful to help automate and clean out the inbox to, again, help speed up the process of directing and get organized. We'll spend more time on a variety of rules in the Get Streamlined section. All right, I'm going to take another quick pause. And as we're going through this Get Organized content, see what other questions you guys might have. Please feel free to unmute and ask your questions. If there's problems with unmuting, let me know. It might be a master control thing that I can change. All right. Well, I'm going to keep going with some of these concepts then. So again, in Get Organized, we have what we're trying to do. Then we put where do we go for processing it. So we've covered the, if we're going to do it, we can do it right away. And then typically once you've done something, you might either file it in your keep folder or it might end up in your waiting folder. Anything that you defer is going to likely end up in your waiting folder. We covered delete. We cover delegate may end up, or defer ends up in respond, delegate ends up in waiting, and then we just covered the direct. So that's where the stuff goes. Then for storage, here's what storage can look like, okay? And you guys have all this flexibility in storage, but the main thing to keep in mind about your storage is you want to store whatever you need to store, so that if you need to find it, you can. You know, if you need to retrieve it, you can. So figure out what amount of folders work best for you, and then use those accordingly. If it's not working for you, the indicator that you have that it's not working for you is all the stuff that piles up in your inbox. If your inbox is full of stuff that you're storing, then your folder system may not be working. If, however, you're just like, oh yeah, I got this message. So as an example, I still keep my complex folders. Keep in mind, I have had my Hotmail account for, I believe now 25 years. So if this message that I know I like to keep segmented in that one place, that is not a problem because I'm regularly keeping up with it. It's not something that I need. It's not bogging down my inbox. So just keep in mind that the stuff that's working for you don't change. And again, you'll see in my Hotmail account, I have some complicated folder systems that make sense. And for me, when I find too many things, like I'm like, oh, I'm not using these anymore, I actually make an expired topic folder and move those other things as subfolders in there. As you might also notice, I probably am an email hoarder. I'm not a huge deleter. But there's not a huge reason to delete either. This is just finding what works for you, and it's a crossover of both systems. It doesn't just have to be the, oh, we're only keeping it in for our storage. If you have different folder setups, keep using those. So what folder setups? I want to get some feedback from you guys. When you think of like how many folders are you currently using for storage? All right. So if you're using for storage less than like 5 folders, just put a 5. Less than 5, put a 5 in your comments. If you're using more than 5, let's say up to 10 folders, put a 10. So 5 or 10. Or if you just have like a very complex folder system, and that's okay too. If it's working for you, I want you to put a plus because it's working. And if it's not working for you, I want you to put a minus. Michael is a 5, keeping it simple. And 5 meaning he might not have 5 folders. He's really keeping it 5 or fewer. What about the rest of you? Again, if you have a very few number of folders, so I thought 5 or less, just put a 5 in. If you have 5 to 10, go ahead and put a 10 in. If what you're doing is working for you, you have more than 10, but it's working for you, put a plus. Thank you, Teresa. I love it. 15, but I'm already consolidating. Should be less than 10. That's awesome, Heidi. It takes practice. And again, when it's working for you, don't feel like you need to change. If it's not working for you, that's when things need to change. You guys also have the chance. We're at about the halfway point of our time right now. Does anybody want to share their screen with us And again, we'll make sure, you know, from a confidentiality standpoint, all this stuff stays internal only. There's non-disclosures and things like that. But does anybody want to share their screen and say, hey, how would you organize that? You could share your screen and turn off your message preview. That might be the easiest way so that sensitive information isn't being shared. But showing us your folder setup, and we can certainly give you some suggestions. Teresa, I'd be thrilled if you'd put yours up. Let's go ahead and take a look. There are times when I do just a one-on-one session and I call it an inbox intervention. So perhaps we'll look at Teresa's and give her some real suggestions right now. So let me turn off my screen sharing. Beautiful.
Can you see us? Can you see it now?
I can. You're good. Okay, so I know that you've been making some really good progress on getting things organized. What is working for you right now?
So what is working is, and as you're talking today, I'm thinking of other things that I can do. So what I've done is, rather than having all of my, so I've got, you know, this folder here, the PAL files, these are the ones that have already been underwritten. These are the applications pending, these TBD ones.
Yep.
And then my in process ones are kind of the important ones.
Yep.
But I'm thinking if I use search folders, I may not have to have these individual folders instead.
Right.
And I might just be able to make you know, an active file one to sort into as kind of like your respond folder. Is kind of how I'm thinking I should do it.
Yep. Perfect. Well, so we can let's take a look at that. And so if you don't mind, could we try and make a search folder and have you be the demo for that?
Sure.
Okay. So scroll on all the way down to the left, and I'm going to let you do it rather than taking control of your screen. Yep, perfect. So right click on search folders and go to new search folder. Okay. So the search folders, there's all sorts of ways that these search folders can grab information and bring them together. You can go from reading mail, etc. We're going to go down towards organizing mail. And then do the mail with specific words. Perfect.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. And then where you have the customized search folder, click on choose. And so let's just pick, do you want to just pick, like, for example, a loan number? So I see a couple with like let's start with maybe the last name Monroe. So I see a couple in your inbox like that. So MUNROE, and then hit add. And now do that loan number with it as well. So it's 200. Yep, you got it. And then hit add. And there may be other things that we would add to this.
Add everything. Skip the 2000 for the loan number too, and just put the numbers after it, because a lot of times they'll truncate that. So you'll want to do both of them.
Yeah, so do add on that too. So, yep, perfect. Thank you. And now hit add again. So this is where you can really customize. And if there are, we'll go through this one and then we'll come up with a couple ideas for search folders as well. So go ahead and hit OK. There may be, perfect. There may be different things that you add to that one folder. Now, yep, go ahead and hit OK. And there we go. So it's searching, thinking.
Oh, this one's going to take a while. I forgot she's a refinance, so it's going to pull all of her stuff. Is it going to pull all of her old stuff that I've got sorted into kind of like a closed file that's in a separate folder with Monroe?
Possible.
Okay.
Possible.
It will, Teresa. Did you guys, I missed the part, did you select subject only or frequent text fields, Jennifer, when you guys were talking about it?
We did contain specific words, so we kept it at the very simplest level to start.
Okay.
But yes, you can, so if we were to refine it or do a new search folder and go in and specify different criteria. So this is where, and Michael's done this specifically, perhaps we even, at some point, Michael, do a screen share of one of yours, because he's really refined this to the work that you guys are doing, to to say, you know, I think within search folders, we may be able to even filter further with saying like within the last year. Like there's all sorts of different ways that we can refine this. So yeah, it's just taking some time to find all the messages. While you're doing this though, Teresa, if you don't mind, go down to that search folder where it says containing Monroe, right click. Nope, go down to the actual folder that we're looking at. Yep, that one. Right click and now hit add to favorites. So this is a way, you see how that floated up to the top under where you have your inbox, sent items, and deleted items?
Yeah.
So so what I like to think about is if it's something that I'm actively working on, which you guys have a lot of volume of stuff you're actively working on, so I'm not sure if that part's going to work really well for you. But what it can do then is you can see that stuff float to the top. And it's just as easy to pull it out of favorites by going up to favorites and clicking on the containing Monroe, right click, and then remove from favorites. That is not getting rid of the search folder. It's just showing where it's appearing. So yeah, this one right now has pulled up 25 messages so far, but it's pulling it all into one place. So now can you click on the view tab for a second? Okay, it's not letting us view as conversations in here. So just, you know, again, a couple things as you're looking through to say, hey, how does this work and how can we use all of these tools together and in sync? This grabs them all together, but it doesn't necessarily smush them up. But what's nice here as well, Teresa, is it's pulling, as you can see, it's pulling stuff from your sent items. So that idea of going into your sent items and processing from there may become less important when you're using tools like this. Because in theory, I don't want stuff stored in sent because you just don't always know where sent, what's landing in sent. So in theory, your sent items should be gone through on a semi-regular basis. I do mine basically daily to say, hey, I'm either keeping you and it's done, I'm deleting you because I never need you again, or I'm waiting on something with this and it goes into my waiting folder. And I actually process quick out of my sent items. And if I keep up with it, it doesn't pile up. The volume of work that you guys are doing, I would rather see you use stuff like in a conversation or using these search folders where, you know, you are using the flags and other tools to indicate you have to be working on it, but you don't have to spend the time going through and pulling stuff out of your sent items. Does that make sense?
Well, because the search folder will automatically just kind of sort it into that, correct?
It can. Yep. So you can. So if you look up at the very top right, you have a little search area there, and then you see current folder, and then you'll see there's a little like drop down that says by folder, just down to the left, just a little and down. So by folder. Yep. So here you can arrange it by date. You can arrange it by who it was sent to. So click on arrange by date. Right now it's putting it in by the folder where it lives. But now by date, you're looking at what's been going on most recently. And it's still pulling from all the different folders. So you'll see all the way over to the right where it says inbox on that first message, you'll see like, oh, the next message had been filed. Go down a little bit more, you see some from inbox, you see some from sent items, but by date is showing you the most current first.
I like the idea of this. If it will automatically just sort it out.
Yep.
And I can just work from
Yep.
that as far as like an active folder sort of, like if I time block, which again, I'm not very good at that either. I'm trying to be better. In fact, I don't time block at all, but I need to. If I time block time to work on active files, then I can just go to these search folders, you know?
That's exactly right. So think about this. The goal here, the reason why these search folders are so powerful for you guys with the volume of stuff that you have coming in is that you do not, if we can avoid spending time actually looking for the stuff to do. What this can do is this is automating when stuff comes into your inbox, it's automatically going into the folders where you need to do it. And you can tell that you haven't done it because you can see like how many unread messages there are. And you can also use the flags and categories in your search folders. Those still work there. So if you are automating the stuff from your inbox that is already like in process to do, and your habit is to create a search folder for your new projects, you're spending time going in and doing the stuff rather than looking for the stuff that you need to do. Does that make sense for everybody?
That's super helpful.
And I think you will find that you're able to simplify your folder system by using these search folders. At some point, like at your search folders would be then everything that you have in process. Let's try doing one more search folder. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Go down to search folder again and do right click on it and do new search folder. We're going to do this one just a little bit different. And let's go down all the way down. Yep. And do the custom search folder. So what we did before was mail with specific words. That's the one that we were looking at. Now we're going to create a custom search folder and click on the choose button down below. Okay, so you have to name it. So this one, if you wanted to get more, I don't know if I want to say creative, but if you want to get more maybe systematized with your naming. So you had something up there that was, you had a couple different codes at the beginning of like active or things like that. So, you know, when you do this one, you might want to do like ACT and then, or something like that. That's like that code that you were doing.
Okay.
And then you don't have to put we don't want it to actually say yes, like that. This one, we can say rather than containing Monroe or the loan number or something like that. Do you have a different one? And I know we have too many windows open. You might have to cancel out of this to go see like what the different one might be that we can use.
Angelini would be a good one because I can see it up there.
Okay, let's do that. So, yep, do that. And now go to criteria. And this is where Michael was saying, like, where are we looking for the words? And so in here, it's messages. And you can do that same thing like we did Monroe and the loan number and those kinds of things. So you can do Angelini.
And so I could do this, right?
Yep. And then exactly. So you want that to be in the subject field and message body. Correct. Now, if there is one particular person, like if there's a different appraiser or something that you're working with on any of these, you can get more specific and select the froms and things like that. But you don't have to. If everything that is coming about Angelini should just go in this folder, then I would not narrow it down more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is one example. Let's hit OK. Hit OK. And so now this again would create that folder, the IP Angelini. And now in this case, it didn't look for all of those terms. We kept it really simple for the sake of the demo and searching. But this is where it's going to pull it all together. And then just for the sake of visibility, can you right click on that IP Angelini search folder? All the way down. Yep, right there. Right click. And other thing that I'm looking at here is that we do not have the ability to move these up and down from a visual standpoint in here. So it just, part of it is, how much does that really matter for you? I'm not sure. You might want to keep that in mind when you're creating that stuff. But if you did make it a favorite, up in your favorites, you have the ability to move things up and down in the order up there.
Well, can I move this search folder up here like that?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think
like
nope. And try right-clicking. No, right-clicking on search folder doesn't, because it only gives you the option for a new one. So yeah, they by default do leave that down at the bottom. Michael, any other tricks that you would have in this part of it that has been working really well for you? Because honestly, I think we should probably do just a separate mini lesson on the efficiencies that you've gained just in this one piece.
No, I think that you hit most of it for sure. The only difference that, like, you've got the IP there. I use it by loan number. I mean by date. I
Closing
can
date.
screen share if you want. I can show it to you fast if that's
Oh
easier.
yeah, please go ahead.
All right, let me snooze this for an hour. All right, so over here, so you see some are in. This is a lot of where the active loans are. So these are all. There's a few things about these emails that are coming in. All the active loans are up here. So there's 144 unread messages down in here that are all sorting into one up here. And that's really my reminder to just look at it. But a lot of times I look at them by file, and so we've got the closing date there, and so that's how we know what's coming up next. And usually when these emails get into this one folder, they go into keep active loans, and these are all search folders that are looking in there. But there's some issues, like in this case, you see a couple of these, like this email here there's a couple things right at the top of this one that there's a name match. You see KOCH, and so there's a rule issue. So that's not the best example, but let me give you like this one here. So Gandinez has been texting us a lot, so she sent a ton of texts, but in that case, we can get rid of half those emails just by doing that. But this is set up to search. Actually, this one is set up to search all, but really what I've been doing is trying to just have it search anything in the inbox and these folders here, these keeps, not the withdraws and the closes. That's just part of getting these folders together. But at any rate, to avoid making it complicated, I'm looking for the loan number, the street address, the name, all in frequently used text is how I have it always set up.
Oh, okay.
And so it's looking for all those. But what happens is there's a rule. So now it's going to start over on its search because of what I just did. But there's a rule that moves most of these emails, which is what you'll talk about next week. But I have a rule that it looks for any email that comes in that has the loan number, the address, or the borrower's name, essentially. And if it didn't come from Teresa or was sent to Teresa, it's automatically forwarded to her and moved into here. So typically my review of these emails, because she's handling the active loans, I can come through here and get through these 100 and some emails in minutes usually. Like in this case, it's a calendar invite, I'm accepting it, and the other stuff, it doesn't even impact me, so I'm just going to mark them red. And I can go all the way down. Like this is a little bit more impactful one. We're waiting to hear back from, looks like we did on underwriting, so I'm not going to do the ones from other than today, but mark those red and kind of clean that up, and I'll come back to it later when I'm not demoing. But we can usually get through, like in this case, Young, 20 emails. He hasn't signed his intent. We knew that. So I can mark the rest of those red because Teresa's working on that. I already know there's nothing in here that I need to worry about. So you can usually fly through the active loan files very quickly for me.
Can you jump on one of those right now, Michael, just for the sake of, maybe it's the Angelini one. Could you jump back to that? Yep. And would you mind clicking on the cleanup conversation one? So upper left hand, yep, that guy. So when you use these things together, okay, so your stuff is that clean, which is beautiful, at least in this folder. When you use these things together, so the idea is
I run the cleanup on this active loans pretty regularly, so it cleans them all up at once.
Oh my God, you're the master. This is awesome. I have seen people take this stuff and run with it. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody do it to this degree, because I think what you're really showing is how much time how is stuff getting moved into the active loans? Are you moving it, or is it automating into that?
No, it's automating into that and automatically forwarding to Teresa as well, unless she sent the email or it was sent to her. Like the system doesn't, so she's not getting duplicates, which actually, if Maggie's on the call, Maggie was the one who had helped me figure that piece out probably 6-8 months ago, because we were at one point, they were getting duplicates of everything, even what they sent me, which was obviously annoying for them.
Right.
So, and then they know that Teresa knows that I'm not really paying attention to my active loans at all unless she tells me. So we actually have a system where she can put a special code in an email, and it will stop all the rules. So it stays actually in my inbox. So she can forward something back to me to eliminate the automation, essentially, or stop the automation, which has worked really well for us for years.
I believe that we need to give you like the Wizard Master of Outlook award, because the systems that you guys have figured out, I think they take all of these concepts, but they're applying them in such a way that, yeah, I feel like I'd like to draw a wizard hat on your head right now. I just don't know how to do that in Teams.
It's a lot. It comes from a lot of frustration. I mean, at the end of the day, we're processing a boatload of emails. You can see yesterday I was in meetings almost all day, and so I didn't have the opportunity to really respond to much of anything unless it was super urgent and somebody usually texted or emailed me about it. So I have 123 emails I have to respond to just from yesterday and already this morning. So when that kind of volume is happening, and none of that, not a single one of those 123 are the stuff that's inactive. That those active 99 are a completely different set of messages, right? And so when you're getting that volume, and some of us on this call, and many of us are seeing that kind of stuff, you have to figure out a system, or you're going to you get buried.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that was a super helpful component to what we've got going on here today. So, I mean, really what that's done, and part of the reason why I wanted to get into search folders with everyone was because we had covered that a bit in our last call, and the last call recording did not sync up properly. So I wanted to make sure that people who, were on the Get Clean and now we're in the Get Organized, that you're seeing like what that whole system is starting to come through like. And so the next part of this then is where we start taking those messages. Now, you guys are actually, by using the tool the way that you are with the search folders, you're kind of creating your own to-do, especially because you have it based on loan close date. Let me get my screen back up to share with you guys. So what that means is this next part where we talk about the idea of get started. Our topic next week is get started. And the idea of that is, how do you take these messages that you flagged and then turn them into tasks that you're managing? And when we talk about this concept in general, we get into the task manager and we start to look at how do we use very clear visual cues about, where do we start? And my goal with that is always to avoid the scrolling. Now, with the search folders that you guys have, and again, with the volume of email that you have, I'm going to be interested to see how you guys are going to apply it to the work that you're doing. Because if I look at some of those unreads, I believe it's more like you'd flag it and say, okay, I need to work with the, make sure there's an appraiser assigned to this one, and I need to make sure this. And I'm not sure if having your task list filled with all of the flagged messages is going to serve you well. But we'll teach you the concepts first, and then we'll figure out how it applies to you guys next. So that's what's coming up next week. Next week, Monday, you're going to get your video on the Get Started, which is the task and priority management with visual cues. And then the last week is the rules and other systemization. So again, I hope that you guys, I don't know that we've really put together a place where you guys can have additional chat or ask additional questions about this. Yeah, so Michael did say what's spot on is that task list is gonna grow too immensely. So I don't want to. We'll have to really talk about how to implement this. Otherwise, any feedback? I did try doing those new like explainer videos to make things concise. Is that helpful for you guys? Like, we really shortened up this last video series that we did to like under 15 minutes. Was that video helpful? If you haven't watched the video, I completely understand. Try and get that on your radar to do. What's nice is in YouTube, if you want to speed it up and watch it like at 1.25 or 1.5, you could probably get this thing done in 10 to 12 minutes. So we highly encourage you to check out those videos and then come to the live Q&A webinar, because that's giving you the foundation for what we're covering. Any other comments, thoughts, feedback? All right. Thanks, everybody. This is going to get uploaded again, so you guys will all have access to it and can share it with the folks who were not able to attend today. And please, if you're finding it helpful, encourage others to get started. They can, they don't have to get started with where we land next week. They can go back and start from the beginning. All the material is out there for them. But if you're able to start saving time and you help one other person start saving time by using some of these systems, that actually just helps the capacity for the whole organization at a time where you guys are just rocking it. So thank you so much for everything and have a great day.